A pleasant evening to you all. I'd like to say welcome, good evening. Yet another time to learn. Today we had the elections, quite interesting, and I'm sure we all learned something from the exercises so far. So we would like to appreciate everyone for being a part of that and for sticking with us throughout this semester. The 9th cohort, we have done fantastically well, and we would just like to commend you all for bringing the energy and just being a part of this exercise. I want to believe that we have learned a lot and we are still learning. Today is yet another time to learn. Today we would be looking at media in governance, media in democracy. Apologies for that, media in democracy. And we have a facilitator. I can see he's already in class. And so without further ado, or wasting so much of our time, we will delve right in. But before then, I'd like to still reiterate our class protocols. Please, when you come in, place your name in the chat box as you'd like to see it presented to you or written on your certificate at the end of the cohort or at the end of the session. Also, whilst the session is going on, if we have questions, we can either place them in the chat box or you would wait till a facilitator is done and then we can indicate if we have questions with show of hands and we'll take that accordingly. This session should be wrapping up within 2 hours or less. So let's ensure that we stick to our rules and protocols so that we have a seamless session. All right, let's go straight into it. I would now read out the profile of our facilitator who will take us on media in democracy. Our facilitator today, this evening, is the Executive Director of the Center for Journalism, Innovation and Development, CJID, a media innovative think and do tank with a mission to enable a media that promotes the values of democracy in Africa. CJID owns and operates a range of media platforms, including the Premium Times, an investigative journalism platform, Dubawa, a fact checker, pressattack.ng, leaks.ng, campusreporter.ng, gosi.app, amongst others. He started his career in 2006 as a management consultant, but he has since worked as a presidential candidate manager, a presidential campaign manager, apologies, a policy consultant in 4 continents, and an energy entrepreneur. He is also currently the founder/board chairman of the Madiba Foundation for Good Governance, and he is the founder CEO of Tao Energy. He is an enthusiastic, albeit terrible golfer. He's a competent board/card game player and a happiness hacker. Well, I guess for that last point, we can reach out to him and ask him about specifics, details on how he has been able to hack life. So please, with lovely emojis, let's make welcome Dr. Toby Uluatola, our facilitator this evening, as he makes his way to the virtual lectern. Over to you, sir. You're welcome. Dr. Toby.
Hi, Lisa. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, this is Adishola. Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Adishola. Oh, my bad, Adishola. I thought it was Lisa. Adishola, thank you so much for the kind introduction. I appreciate the kind words. And I think we'll get started. I believe it's week 9. Isn't that the case?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Is this the final week? Or is there
no, it's not.
Are there?
Yes, we have 2 more weeks to go. So
2 more weeks to go. 2 more weeks to go.
Yes.
Okay. I thought at some point it was 9 weeks. So okay. So thank you so much to the people in the audience for joining us and for persevering this long. I know that it's a rigorous process, but I also know that having sat through some of the part of the process before myself, I also know that it's a very rewarding one. So my gratitude goes to the entire team at the Electoral College, particularly your executive director, Mr. Kunle Lawal, who is a very good friend of mine and a very reliable advocate for a new Nigeria. And to everyone else who's on the team, Lisa, Adishola, thank you very much for the effort you put into putting together this very rich sessions that y'all have been hosting. So today we'll be talking about media in democracy and what is the role of media in democracy, why is it important, and what is our, as an individual in society, what is our duty to media in society, and how does that all work together to build a solid foundation for democracy. As you can see in the slide in my on my screen, you can see without the media, democracy falls apart. And don't take it from me, take it from some of the founding fathers of some of the bigger democracies that we all look up to. And this is Thomas Jefferson, while he was still an ambassador in Paris. He was writing a letter to one of his friends who he had delegated to go attend the Congress, the Congress on his behalf, Ed Cunningham. And he told the guy, see, well, it left to me to decide whether we should have a government without newspapers or newspapers without a government. I should not hesitate a moment to prefer the latter. But I should mean that every man should receive those papers and be capable of reading them. So, and the reason why he says that is because ultimately, democracy belongs to the people. The people are, in the famous words of Abraham Lincoln, democracy is a government of the people, meaning you're leading the people, by the people, meaning that one of the people is leading the people, but for the people. And the for the people part is the part that many times we don't think about, because ultimately it's not just that people from amongst us are leading us, but those people also have to lead us in a way in the line of our interests. But how does that get communicated between us and them, and between them and between the people who we have then elected, who are by the people who were elected to lead us, and how do we resolve that communication difference? That's where the media comes in. And someone may ask me in the audience, there's maybe a question in your mind that, oh, whatever the media can do, social media is now doing it. We will get to that point. And I think that social media is just as important an element of media, but there are critical elements of the journalistic media that we will get to in a bit. And I guess the next person who I will call to come and help me really helps answer that question, of what kind of media are we talking about? And we all know this man, Nelson Mandela, is perhaps one of the biggest icons of democracy in Africa. And he says that he was talking to the press club of Cape Town while he was president, and he said certain things. One of the things he said was that, see, the press is not just a participant in democracy. It is a critical, independent, and investigative press is the lifeblood of any democracy. And he went on to say that, see, the press is not just a watchdog. It's more than a watchdog. The press is the builder of the building blocks of democracy. And you would ask me why that's the case. And I will just go on to the next slide to explain how that works in a little bit. See, modern democracy brings together essentially three elements of society. There is the individuals and markets. So that's the private autonomy of citizens, each of whom is trying to pursue his own life, his own interests. And in the words of Adam Smith, it's not by the benevolence of the baker that I get bread in the morning. It's because the baker has a selfish interest to feed his family and to make a little extra money that he can use to buy his house and buy his car and fuel his car and send his children to school. That's how I get my daily bread in the morning. It's not because the baker is generous. But in the pursuit of the baker's interests and in the pursuit of the journalist's interest and in the pursuit of the banker's interest, in the pursuit of the farmer's interest, there are times when their interests will collide and their interests will not align. It may be in my interest to say that I want to come to Adeshola's house and dispossess her of all her properties because I have a gun, and Adeshola's property now becomes mine. So, whereas at the beginning of almost every, they say that at the beginning of every dynasty is a tout, you know. Whereas at the beginning of every dynasty, there's a tout who probably went and raped, pillaged towns and societies and decided that it's all his own. In a democracy, that's not how we acquire power. In a democracy, we acquire power by the consensus of everybody. So when everybody agrees that they want to give power to certain people, it is then the job of those people to protect the private autonomy of each individual that has given them that power. It is then the job of those people to create what we call the state, democratic citizenship, the states, the people, the infrastructure that we have created to organize ourselves and to resolve those tensions that arise from you chasing your interests and me chasing my interests and all of us chasing our individual interests and trying to come together as a democratic society. So there is the markets, there is the states, and then there is the media, and there's the community, which is the third leg. If you have a very strong market and you don't have a strong state or a strong community, what you have is an oligarchy. You have a few people just controlling everything and just taking advantage of everybody. You have an oligarchy. You have a bunch of monopolies that are they just set prices anyhow. And it just creates significant, income inequalities. If you have a very strong state and the markets and community are weak, you end up with what we call an autocracy. And if you have a community that is too strong at the expense of the state and individuals, then you have anarchy. And we all know that anarchy, there's no society can thrive where there is anarchy, which is why, I recall when NSAS was going on, and there are people who will disagree with me on this, but I think this point ought to be made, that at a certain point after I had gone on for a while, and then people said, see, come negotiate. But there was nobody to really come drive the negotiations. The negotiations weren't happening. And at some point they said, okay, everybody go home. There is a state of emergency. And because ultimately you can't have a state of anarchy for too long. It costs the society money. It costs each of us as individuals, as it costs all of us, for anarchy to go on for too long. And the same thing you saw the Arab Spring, when Bouazizi blew himself up, and then Saudi Arabia saw that it was coming to them, and very, very quickly, they quickly suppressed it and even exported resources to other other countries in the Arab region, particularly Bahrain, to quickly suppress the uprising before it turned into an anarchy. And the reality is that you don't want you don't want, and it was I believe it was Thomas Hobbes, which was a very famous political philosopher, who said that, you know, a bad state, a bad government is better than no government, because when there's no government, people return to a state of nature where we are all trying to kill ourselves for limited resources. So ultimately, you don't want anarchy. So all three have to work together. And the media is the conduit that allows, that really is the mouthpiece of the community, that allows, that creates, that allows the public sphere and acts as an intermediary between the state and society, as well as markets. So, I mean, this is just theoretical. I'm quoting Jürgen Habermas, and also there's also another book by this gentleman who was the president of the CBN governor of India, who also wrote a book that is quite similar. So I've merged both ideas together to come up with this, but it really just explains how society works together. So how does the media play that role, its role in democracy? And I describe here the ontology of the media, the essence of the media, in three roles really that the media plays, that the journalistic media particularly plays in society. One is that of a watchdog. The other is as a gatekeeper, and the third is as an agenda setter. And when you talk to people who are professors of mass communication or professors of journalism or media, they like to talk about these three roles a lot: media as watchdog, media as gatekeeper, media as agenda setter. And I'll just really explain each one a little bit. I think the watchdog part of it, we all can relate to that. It's the job of the media to scrutinize what government officials are doing, their institutions and other agencies. What are they doing? It's the job of the media to go do those investigations and come back and tell us as citizens, because all of us were busy chasing our daily bread. We may not have time, you know, to pay attention to see everything. But it's the job of the media to go out there and scrutinize what government is doing, and government institutions and agencies. And it's also, you know, the job of the media to provide principled resistance to the external forces attempting to subvert media autonomy. And those external forces may be more than just, it's not just the government, it's also markets. Because many times, you know, the issue is not always government. So it's not always the state. Sometimes the issue is in the markets. And we've seen that play out a lot, especially in when you look at, you know, the financial crisis of 2008, for example, and even the crisis that we face today, the inflation crisis that we face globally today. A lot of it is really, the media is really interrogating. A lot of it is the states, because, you know, I'm starting from places like America, where they printed a ton of money during COVID, to even in Nigeria, where we can't produce enough food to feed ourselves. We can't produce enough stuff to get around. So for that reason, things are hard, because we have to import everything, and then we're importing. It's not just our own inflation, we're also importing the inflation of the abroad. So, and then all of us are going to school abroad, we're sending money there. So there's also the markets that we also have to interrogate, and the media plays a role in being a watchdog there. Then the media is a gatekeeper of the public sphere. And that's a little more technical, and sometimes even controversial, because there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. And sometimes the media itself lends itself as a vehicle for disinformation when it doesn't uphold the highest standards of ethics. And you have in the American democracy, for example, you now have so many polarizations that when the left is saying their own and the right is saying their own, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not. This is our gospel, so we have to say it like this because that's what our side says. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. But the role of a media that is functioning correctly is to really be a gatekeeper of the public sphere and help, tackle information disorder, making sure that information that's getting to the people is correct information. And also that people across the aisle can listen and hear each other. Because there are many times, the truth is, a lot of the content, if you're living in today's media age, where the people who, the champions of the owners of the big tech companies that drive social media, which is where most of us get our information from now, they prioritize engagement and engagement over veracity. So for that reason, information that I am more likely to engage with information that already agrees with my worldview. So because of that, for that reason, they will feed me only things that agrees with my worldview most of the time. And some people will go through life not hearing a different worldview, but theirs.
Sorry, we can't hear you, sir. Are you there?
Okay, I thought it was my network.
Oh,
So
I think you went off.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Let's give him a few minutes to reconnect.
Yes, yes.
Hello, am I back?
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay,
Sorry, you had the network challenge.
I got disconnected for a minute because
Alright.
I live in Nigeria and and Smile, which I was supposed to use, just 5 minutes to the call decided to go dark on me. So I ended up using Airtel and a call came through. So I think Smile is back. So pardon me, let me connect to Smile and hopefully
that's fine,
go
sir.
dark on me and
Alright,
no
sir.
drops our call before the day is over. What's also interesting is that I'm in the office, there's fiber optic, but it's so unreliable. Talk of Nigeria, third world problems. Okay, all right. Can everyone still hear me?
Yes, please.
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
All right, so I changed my network now. So I was talking about the third role, which is the role of the agenda setter. And this is an important role because in the end, we're in election season, like I was saying. And I was saying that most of the things that people have been talking about in this election season are things like, this candidate is old. Oh, this one is from the north. Oh, this one is from the east. Or this one, is probably not healthy. or that one is probably, is probably IPOP and things like that. And the question is, what about the issues that matter to you and I? I mean, the food prices are going up. No one has come out to tell us what they would do about it. People are dying on the streets of Abuja, and people are getting kidnapped. We're not highlighting these issues, and it's the job of the media to highlight this issue. So we did a survey in the media organization that I lead, where we talked to about 13,000 young people to understand what the issues are that matter to people. And top on the list is security. Next to that is corruption, and then things like food security, jobs, food, and things like that come afterwards. But it's definitely very clear that people are very worried about their safety in this country. And we've not had any of the candidates come out and tell us what they will do to make us feel safer. And it's the job of the media to continue to highlight these issues, but not just from what the media owner is interested in, but from a perspective of the people. So, and that's the agenda setting role of the media. So there are many legal foundations to this role. So starting from the treaties that Nigeria belongs to, beginning with the Article 19 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights, which says very clearly that, which states the role of the media in democracy. So it states very clearly that an independent media is a human right. It's not just about the media itself being free and taken care of. It's a human right that affects you and I as well. And as well as Article 9 of the Africa Charter, Section 25 of the ECOWAS Treaty, and so on and so forth. And even in Nigeria, our statutes and across West Africa, you can see almost every constitution across West Africa. And in Nigeria, more precisely, Section 22 of Nigeria's constitution talks about the press, radio, television, and other agencies of mass media at all times should be free to uphold the fundamental objectives contained in this chapter and uphold responsibility and accountability of government. The only problem in Nigeria, and I'll get to some of these challenges a little later. The only problem in Nigeria is that even though the Constitution gives the media the responsibility to uphold accountability of government, it does not give the media the tools or the legal power that is justiciable to do it. And you will find as we go on that there are many laws in our books that constrain the media from doing that job. And part of the job that we need, the sensitization that we need to do to have as people who potentially could be in government tomorrow is how do we enable a media that supports democracy effectively? But we'll get to that. First, I'll give some historical context about the media in Nigeria. So newspapers emerged in Nigeria around 1859 with the West African pilots. You see the picture up there, and by 1959 was when television first showed up in Africa, and National Wire Service started around 76. But then the effective transition to digital, which is essentially what is driving today's type of media, really started around 1995. This is the first BSATs in Ife in 96, and in ISPs, and then you had Post Express online, the first online newspaper. But then the one that really first became a major online newspaper was 234 Next. I don't know how many people remember 234 Next. There were predecessors to 234 Next, but they weren't really very solid, professional, or even hyperlinked, searchable, and streaming multimedia. But 234 Next really changed that in 2009. How many people, I don't know how many people remember 234 Next. I don't know if anybody wants to just indicates, if you remember 234 Next. So they were really, really a very solid newspaper. And for people who don't know, 234 Next, the reason why they are no more was they had then done a story where they, at the time it was the Jonathan government, and they had gone to attack, they had done an investigative story unearthing some corruption in the way, in the first subsidy business and in the allocation of lifting contracts and importation contracts that fingered Dizeni and a couple other people. And before you knew what they just said, the government just said, hey, nobody should advertise with them again, from banks to oil companies to everybody, you know. And at the time, the news media in Nigeria had not evolved to the point where there are multiple streams of income that people have, and it just wasn't long before they had to pack up shop. So that really describes, you know, some of the experiences of people who try to do investigative journalism in many climes. So just moving on from there to evolving to the current context, where we have right now, you know, a patchwork of about some 201 government-owned TV stations, about 43 privately owned TV stations, about 185 government-owned radio stations, 97 privately owned radio stations, more than 100 private newspapers, about 51 multi-channel satellite distribution outlets, a bunch of campus journalism stations, and so on and so forth. So there are many.
Sorry, Dr. Tola, we can't see your slides anymore. I think when you went off, it stopped sharing. The screen stopped.
Oh, my bad.
Showing. Yes, please.
My bad. So let me just go back to just show those slides. My apologies. My apologies. I wish someone would have told me like 10 minutes ago before I continued running my mouth. So I'll just run through. I'll just show the slides. We're not doing great with time. So I think I had stopped where we were talking about agenda setter. So I showed a slide where I talked about the legal foundations for media and democracy. I talked about the Constitution of Nigeria, and then I got to the historical context. And now I'm talking about the evolving current context of media in Nigeria. So NCC estimates there are about 150 million internet users. And out of that 150 million active social media users, estimated at around 32 million. WhatsApp is about 90 million. But if you take out WhatsApp, as of January 2022, and I don't know if Data Reportal has updated this number, but I got these numbers in January. Facebook had 26.1 million, YouTube about 32.9, Instagram about 9.5, 9.05, LinkedIn about 6.3, Snapchat about 9.5 million, Twitter about 325K. So for those of you Twitter champions that you think all of us are here, you are not plenty. So yeah, so but you know, you see Facebook is really up there in terms of the number of people. And one of the things that I also just found really interesting that Statista captured is that, you know, the Nigerian social media denizen, meaning the Nigerian citizen who spends time on social media, on average spends more time, more than 4 hours than any other country in the world. So, so we are really the social media champions here in Nigeria, despite the fact that our internet is not great and everything. We're really screwed on, and we're up there. So that is both an opportunity and a challenge, because it tells us that yes, the public square is shifting from your television screens and your radio screens to the online space. And a lot of what even folks like Channels and Arise, particularly Channels, I would say, that are doing very well in the offline space, in the traditional space, they find that a lot of their traction also comes from their online presence. So you have a situation where a lot of the eyeballs are in the offline presence, online presence, online platforms, and that creates both a challenge and an opportunity. For us at Premium Times, when we started Premium Times 11 years ago, we made a very deliberate decision that we will not do anything offline. We will not set up we will not print paper newspapers. We will not set up traditional terrestrial TV station and radio station, because we believe very strongly at the time, as we still do now, that there will soon be dinosaurs. And very soon, all of us will get our information online in some way or shape or form, whether it's through streaming or through traditional online process, social media, or what have you. And that reality is starting to happen. But that comes with its challenges for a lot of traditional media, because traditional media, is important for the reasons that we highlighted earlier. Whereas, you could have, someone like, I'll just use a random example. I mean no harm to Omojua, but you can have someone like Omojua who has, 1 million followers on Twitter, say things and then everybody just follows him. But Omojua doesn't have the job of making sure that what he's saying is true, accurate, is coming from a place of independence. He hasn't been paid to say it. It is coming from a place of fairness. It is impartial. It's coming from a place of humanity. And the humanity part is very critical, because a lot of people don't even people in journalistic media sometimes don't realize that not everything that you have, that you can report, is worth reporting. You also have to bring humanity into what you're doing and accountability. So we have a situation where the media is facing a whole lot of challenges, and I call the first set endogenous challenges, because they are challenges that are intrinsic to us. And when I like these challenges, I like them, not just for, for traditional media, but also folks who have a platform on social media. And one is, that issue of ethical and professional lapses is so critical, and those journalistic ethics. And one of the things that we at CJID are very big on doing is working with media houses to bring back the ethics of the profession, because the profession is only as good as the quality, as the level of ethics to which we uphold ourselves. And then there's a capacity, in general, there's an underdeveloped capacity to do deep investigative reporting, digital reporting. For the 21st century, there are capacity challenges. A lot of people who are coming out of our schools don't even know how to string a sentence together. So you have a case where there's a lot of remediation that has to be done when people enter the newsroom. And then there's the weak editorial independence and pluralism. What do I mean by that? What I mean is you have a situation where TVC is owned by Bola Tinubu, The Nation newspaper is owned by Bola Tinubu, Arise is owned by Unduka Obiagbena, who's a politician. Channels is owned by John Momo, who is a politician. In the end, you have a case where people who don't really have an independence, are the owners of media, and that comes with its challenges. And when you look at Breitbart, for example, in America, that is owned by Steve Bannon, you would not expect that Breitbart will write anything that is not white supremacist, and the same applies to, in some cases, some would say MSNBC and CNN, who always lean to the left. So, and have, their paymaster. So editorial independence, that independence of the people who are producing the news, the news writers, the reporters on the field who are going out to collect the information, and the editors it is important that they are independent and that they can produce truthful content. So what we do at Premium Times, and we are by no means perfect, but what we do is that we give our editorial team a huge amount of latitude to go find their stories and write the stories that they believe to be true, based on the training in ethics that we've given them. Then we have an editorial board that from time to time reviews the things that have been written and then challenge whether or not those things were written from a place of independence. Now, that process may or may not be leading to editorial independence, but at the very least, there needs to be an effort. There needs to be an effort to take away our biases and allow people who are professionally equipped to do that work of journalism do that work. So, and that's a weakness that, newspapers everywhere, that the media in general has, because a lot of us, quite frankly, are funded by donors. We would do the things that the donors want us to do because we want them to continue to fund us. So hopefully we get donors who don't pressure us to do things that are unethical, or we get advertisers who don't pressure us to do things that are unethical. And that brings us to the exogenous problems, which are the problems that are external to the media, but affect the media, which is the fact that, there's a new digital media space, and there are lots of people who, my niece, who is in her teens and has a lot of followers on Instagram or Twitter because she has a loud mouth and she's good looking, now has a platform, and she can, she can write. She doesn't have to check what she's writing with anybody. She writes it, and people who respect her believe it. And then there is the challenge of, so there's that new media space that media people have to hack. So even as someone who is doing independent journalism, the actual journalism, you now have to quickly tweet, and you have to be very quick to get there, because someone who will not write it correctly with the right context may tweet it before you, and then people lose the context and they don't understand the story. So there is a lot of pressure on the profession that comes with the competition of citizen enthusiasts who are in the space. And then there's the relentless suppression of the free press from increasingly authoritarian regimes, and then an ineffectual receipt business model that is leading to sustainability chain challenge. What do I mean by that? There are newspapers who, for the entire period from COVID till now, have probably only paid 5 months' salary. There are many newspapers, especially during COVID, we did the study at the time, most newspapers weren't paying salaries. And then they tell the reporters, they say, oh, go and collect brown envelopes when you go shoot an event. At least they're giving you brown envelopes when you shoot an event. And the problem with that is that when I collect an envelope from you, I have to write what you're telling me to write. So there needs to be, and that's also true for the media owner himself. I remember there was a time when we had written a story that affected someone who was friends with a bank, and then the bank, who used to be a really big advertiser on our platform, just called and said they were pulling all their ads, and that they were no longer doing business with us again, and we had to give that money back, or we had to give up that money or pull the story, and we wouldn't pull the story, so because it was a correct story, so you lost that money. So you have a case where the business models that we have, and more importantly, there's also the case where Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Google, the tech giants now accrue close to 90 to 95% of all online revenue to themselves. So even though it's my content that is on the platform, most of the revenue that comes from the content that I'm putting on their platform goes to them versus myself, because they now have distribution that supersedes the distribution that I do have. Because they have the eyeballs. So there are business models, received business models of media that are breaking down. And there needs to be a lot of innovation in that space, otherwise we'll be dinosaurs. So I say here that there will always be brown envelope journalism because, like I said before, there are newsrooms that don't pay salaries and they tell people when you go report something, collect your brown envelope and you should be fine. So, but in the end, that's not ideal. And in the end, it's important that we still preserve and there continues to be a tradition of democratic and anti-corruption promotion and a professionalism that drives the sector. And some of the work that we need to do in our democracy is to make sure that that continues to be the case. Otherwise, democracy becomes a little hard to sustain and manage effectively. So I think I talked about the challenge in the new media space where there is now the challenge of information. So just going deeper into the exogenous challenges a little bit, that, there is the challenge of, information disorder, the information that is in the public sphere being accurate and correct, but also that the information is also prepared in a way that upholds the highest principles of journalism ethics. And when we talk about information disorder, I talked about it earlier, but I glossed over it. I just want to, because I think this is an important point. There are really three types of information disorder. There is what they call misinformation. So misinformation is when your grandmother gets a broadcast on a group that has church members, and they send an information to her, and she broadcasts it to everybody inadvertently. So that's misinformation. She's an unwitting agent of wrong information. But then there is disinformation. Misinformation is not a big challenge because it's people who are just sending things they are not verified, But disinformation, that's a big challenge because disinformation is a very deliberate attempt to mislead a people. And all through history, disinformation has been a tool that autocrats and people who want to acquire power use to acquire power. And we saw it happen, in the US election very aggressively in the first election where Russia sponsored Cambridge Analytica to hack into people's psychography and then send them information that is untrue, but it aligns with their worldview to make them vote a certain way. But then we also saw it again with this next election cycle where Trump came out and said the election will be rigged, it will be rigged. And he kept saying the election will be rigged up until election day because his team knew very well that they would likely lose, not because a lot of the people who will vote Democrats will use mail-in ballots, and mail-in ballots will take a week to count. They will be ahead on election night. And over time, when they count the mail-in ballots, they will get behind. So he knew that will happen. So he kept saying that they will rig it. So when it then happened, it formed the fodder for him to then say, oh, they've now done what I said they would do. Let's go and riot. And that's the same way people can use disinformation to cause insecurity and cost people's lives, because people died, people lost their lives to these things. So it's important that disinformation is a much more strategic and deliberate thing that we have to, us in the media, and also, people all of us who are interested in democracy need to take this thing seriously. I think there's a role for media literacy for us to really educate people how to discern what is correct information. There needs to be fact-checking, but also the technology companies have a role to play as well to make sure that information we get that gets distributed to people is accurate to a large degree. And then I talked about press freedom earlier, being that there are lots of powers that are trying to suppress freedom of expression and freedom of the press. And I said earlier in talking about the UN human rights convention, that declaration, that press freedom is a human right. And it's because it's not just denying the speaker the right to speak, it's also denying you and I the hearers from hearing the information that we need to make the appropriate decision. And there are at least 13 laws right now in Nigeria's books that constrain press freedom, that governments can willy-nilly, if I go and say something today that Lai Mohammed doesn't like, he can tap onto one of these laws to come and arrest him. So, and what we've learned throughout history is that there are no good people. It is the nature of power to corrupt. Starting from people like Martin Luther, I don't know how many of us know the story of Martin Luther, who was the bastion of the Enlightenment. It was the guy who climbed the steps and went to collect the actual manuscript of the Bible and went to make sure that made several copies of it so that people can have copies of the Bible and they can decide for themselves what the Bible says, and there's freedom of information, and nobody, the Roman Catholic Church cannot just come and bamboozle everybody and tell people what to think and what to do. But the very same Martin Luther, when he became powerful and issues and the new sects of Protestants like the Quakers started to emerge that had different views from him. It was the same guy who went to fight for everybody to have their views that was then suppressing those guys. The same thing is true of Benjamin Franklin. Some of us who know the history of America's revolution, fight for revolution for a little bit. And there's the saying that America's revolution actually started between 1760 and 1775. 1775 was when the war of the revolution was fought, where the war of Yorkshire and the war of and the wars that really where they really said, oh, Britain is taking our tea, let's fight Britain, and they really got rid of Britain. But before then, the war of the revolution really started more than 15 years before in the pages of the newspapers. Because the first war is the war for the human mind. That war started more than 15 years before. And folks like Benjamin Franklin had a big brother, James Franklin, who owned a newspaper, the Boston Courant, I believe it was called. And he had written some stories about how, government was trying to suppress certain things, and they put him in jail. They put Benjamin Franklin's brother in jail. And at the time, Benjamin Franklin was 16 years old. He decided to start writing stories at the age of 16 using a pseudonym said do good or something was the name he used for himself. And he started writing stories to reshape the minds of the people in advocacy for his brother and so on and so forth. And then he moved on to Philadelphia, where the government was a little more, the environment was a little more conducive, and set up, his own newspaper that became one of the big, vehicles of a lot of the pamphlets that started coming out that led to the American Revolution. But then the same Benjamin Franklin, when he then became the boss, when he then got into government, this same person who was from the age of 16, had been the ultimate evangelist of press freedom. When even he got into power, even he attempted to suppress the press. So when you see someone like Lai Mohammed, who all through the time when ACN was in the opposition, he was the loudest voice in terms of, oh, let's not suppress the press. They cannot say, we cannot say what we will say. It was the bastion the minute he got in power, it became the same thing. So it's not unique to Nigeria. We need laws and a system that constrain and restrains people, which is why that advocacy, and many of us who were involved in NSAS, we saw this happen, how they use Cybercrimes Act, they use Anti-Terrorism Act to arrest a lot of people and to throw them in jail for months. So until we change these laws and advocate to change these laws, so I'm saying this for those of you who will be in the House of Reps, we need your help to change some of these laws if we are all going to be free, because ultimately you need laws. And I think it was the Swedes, the Scandinavians, that first realized that, see, this thing is about law, and it's not about saying that we are good people and we will uphold freedom of the press. Up from Magna Carta, we've been saying, using government all over the world and paying lip service to the role of the citizen, the role of the press, and so on and so forth. But in the end, when people get into power, and if I put myself in their shoes and I'm doing all this hard work of policy and of doing things, and there's some nonsense reporter who all he wants to write about is the number of girlfriends I have, I will be upset. And I'm like, can't you see that I built sports? Can't you see that I'm doing this? And and that's the thing that you see. So it's normal for people to be upset, and it's when people have power. But when the law restrains them, then I know that, okay, even though I have power, there's a limit to which I can use my power. And that's really what we ought to be driving for, where we talk about press freedom and the need that it's a human right. So, and none of us is a saint. If any of us gets elected into office, we may be the same people to suppress the press, which is why we have to create guardrails in laws that make sure that we don't do that. So, and then finally, in terms of the media, the sustainability challenge that I talked about in media, experience has showed us that private ownership of media is not a guarantee that it will not be a mouthpiece of government. We've seen the case where there are certain media stations essentially they're private entities, but they go collect a contract from, say, Ogun State government. So instead of Ogun State government using OGTV to promote their work, they are using that particular channel as their mouthpiece. So the fact that something is privately owned doesn't mean that it won't have issues of media pressure capture, or it will be sustainable. So we know that, so yes, it is true that the media business model has to be innovative. And one of the areas that we think that needs to happen is that people need to reimagine the products and the services that they offer. And some of the things that we are doing at the CJID is helping media houses think through, how do you innovate? How do you turn your data into value? And how do you do all those things? But also, there needs to be an engagement with governments. There needs to be tax reliefs in places like Sweden, the freest societies that we have. There are different ways in which government, because media is a project of democracy. It's not just a business. Democracy has to come in to ensure that we have the right kind of media. And then finally, as a bonus tip, I just want to give some tips that I think, because I know that the people in this room are people who are going to be running elections in some cases, and some people are going to be working for elections, and we are all interested in being politically literate. I just wanted to give some tips for how you work with media, but it also applies when you work with influencers. So the first tip I'll give is you've got to develop relationships with people, with key editors, reporters, and bloggers. You've got to develop relationships, and there's no two way to develop relationships. You reach out to people, you pay them courtesy visits, you tell them happy birthday on their birthdays, you show up for their weddings and their burials, and you send them, attend their events when they're organizing events. You just have to build those relationships. That's the way to it's just important when you do that. When you then have a story that you want publicity for, it's easier for you to pick up the phone and call the person and say, hey, I have this thing, this show I want to do. I have this campaign stop. Can you send a reporter? So it's important to do that. And then stay in touch. And one of the ways to stay in touch that I find is very effective is find opportunities to engage them in the line of your work. In the line of your work, if there's an opportunity for a training and you can bring in a reporter, reporters always like, to do things like that. I see we are really running out of time, so I'm going to step on the gas. So understand what is newsworthy. Not everything is newsworthy. So, and I come back to this point on the last point. So I'll come back to it on the last point. So you've got to understand what is newsworthy, because ultimately, if your friend is a reporter and you give him a story, he still has to take it to his editor. And if his editor doesn't think it is newsworthy, that story is going nowhere. So you've got to understand what is newsworthy. And even if his editor thinks it is newsworthy, but then it is written a certain way, the editor will say how much they give. If they gave him money, and if it's written a certain way, the editor will say how much they give you. Where's my share? But if it's newsworthy, in some cases they won't even think that you collected money. So obviously, be truthful and accurate. I know that everybody believes they are truthful and accurate. We hosted a session one time, and we had political parties involved. And the guy from APC was like, see, we in our own party, we are always truthful and accurate. But every other party, it is their job as a political party to put out propaganda that serves them. But also we are always truthful. But the others, is their job to put out propaganda, and it's the job of media to counter them. But as much as possible, be truthful and accurate. Understand their limits and needs, respond to calls quickly. For those of us who are already in office, many times media, they want to get your view on something, respond, because you won't know the day you need them. Address problems and move on. Many of us run into issues when we're in the course of our campaigns, and we run into all sorts of address it head on, confess if you have to, and move on. Provide reporters the information in format they can use. It's not just sending them the flyer. Write the story for them. Don't. Many reporters are usually lazy. Write the story for them the way you want it to go up. Don't expect that they will write it for you. Even when they say they want to interview you, write that interview yourself with them the way you want it to go out. Give them the exact picture you want. Don't leave it to them to go find the picture online. So all those things in a format they can use. Do it yourself. And anticipate their need for content and pitch stories. I find that reporters tell me this a lot, that there are people who just call them and tell them, hey, there's this story I think you might find interesting. And that story may not be something that you need. But because you had remembered to call me to give me a story when the story didn't help you, when you come with a story that helps you, I'm more inclined to help you push your story. And then the last point I made, which is almost similar to the one I said, where I say in a format they can use understand what's newsworthy, is that it's important that we understand what stories look like. And I'll explain from what they call the hero's journey. If you've ever watched a movie that was successful, almost every movie that is successful has a very simple plot. There is a hero that wants something. That thing is very difficult to get, but the hero wants something. The hero is striving for that thing and he can't get it. But then he meets along his way, he meets a helper. That helper gives him a few tips. That helper helps him along the way. And then the hero is successful. Almost every story follows that path. So they may spend a lot of time setting the scenario, helping you to understand how challenging the hero's challenges are, how difficult the hero's challenges are. They may spend a lot of time, building a love story into it in the middle, how he found love and the love was challenged, and the lover helped him and the love was. In the end, almost every story that is successful has that story hack, because there's something in our heads where we all want to be heroes, and at the same time we all want to but we all want to feel the journey of someone else, and we want to see ourselves in the journey of someone else. So as much as possible, when you think of a story, think about where is the story hack in this? Where's the story hack in this? When you think of the story, they're trying to organize an event that, say, you are trying to organize a training. Where's the story hack? Who is the hero? Who's the helper? And so on and so forth. So rather than just say, advertise yourself, why don't you start by saying that, instead of saying that, this company has gone to build, my company has gone to deliver rice to these people and that people, why don't you start by saying that poverty is a big problem in Nigeria? There are 100 million kids who are going to die who are going to go hungry tonight. And that problem is a problem that persists, particularly that is across Nigeria. Add some statistics, add some infographics. That challenge is a challenge that has existed since 10 years ago, but it has shot up in the last 1 year because XYZ happened, and XYZ happened in this community, and this community was attacked by security challenges and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. You set up all that background. You then say that, but an NGO has come out to see what they can do about the problem, and they recently organized a food distribution something, and they fed XYZ people. Here's what the people said after they received the food. Here's what the donors said about giving them the food. Here's what we think the long-term implications of them giving the food is. Because children were able to go to school, now their education will be better, and so on and so forth. So it's the same thing we have said. In the end, we just went to share rice. In the end, we just went to share rice. But the story is told two different ways. That in one way, it's a story. In the other way, it's an advertisement. So be careful. So understand that story hack and always seek to use it when you deal with media or influencers or wherever you want to get your word out. That's the end of my presentation. I look forward to engaging on various parts of the presentation with y'all.
All right. That was packed, I must confess. I want to believe that our facilitator did an awesome job. So let's say a very big thank you for all that we have been exposed to. It was quite a lot to take in. I kept brooding, reminiscing, thinking, and I'm glad that I even have the slides so I can always go back and basically brood on it. Right now, we'll be taking questions. I want to confirm if we have questions for Dr. Oluwatola. If you have questions, please kindly indicate by raising up your hand so that we can take you quickly. Questions, comments. He said a lot. He has said a lot. And I want to believe that there might be one or two questions.
Sorry if I was running like it, yes.
Oh, yes, it was quite, yes, you were fast, but there were a lot of things that basically had me thinking. Do we have questions, please? Okay, I see one hand up. Igwu Onwu Linus. Okay. Admin, could you help me unmute him? Okay, let me do that. All right, go ahead, please. You can speak now, Mr. Linus. Can you hear us, sir? You have the floor. You can ask your question. Okay, I wonder what the problem is. If you're not able to speak, you could type it in the chat box.
Yeah, I said you guys should come back inside.
Lisa, your mic is unmuted. We can hear you.
Oh my God.
Sorry. All right, so Mr. Linus, you could type it in because I really couldn't hear you. So right now I'll move to Mr. Charles Osai. Mr. Osai, you can, okay, go ahead. Sincere apologies, please. Hello, Mr. Charles. I have asked you to unmute yourself. Please, could you unmute your mic and speak?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Good evening, all. I'll just go straight to the point. One Thursday, Uduak Apan was sentenced to death for the murder of one Miss Nyobong Omoreng, a graduate of University of Uyo, Akwa Ibom State. And that Umoreng had been lured to her death that day, but by Apan, who promised her employment. Yes, credit to social media for the attention that was given to the crime. Otherwise, she could have been considered missing. Okay, so the Almighty National Broadcasting Commission, NBC, fined Trust TV, MultiChoice, Telecom Satellite, and Star Times for airing a documentary on banditry, making good the threat by one Alhaji, the Minister of Information. So the contention of the government was that the documentary glorifies banditry. I know that government regulates the broadcast media more strictly. After all, it is a state that issues our frequencies and the licensing gives it some leverage. But my question is, at what stage does regulation conflict with press freedom? That is just my question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Charles. That's thought-provoking. Thank you for this. Let me see if I can just take the second question, and then Dr. Toby, you can take both together. So, Mr. Linus, I would have you unmute your mic again. All right, go ahead, please. Why does it keep?
All right, I hope you can hear me now.
Yes.
All right,
Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. My question is coming from the aspect of misinformation and disinformation. You know, recently there have been lots of misinformation, disinformation going out in the media space, and a lot of media organizations are trying to debunk and do what they can do to stem all of those things. So my question is, what is the government supposed to do in fighting such fake news? What is the law saying about fake news, disinformation, and misinformation? Also, what is the law saying about censorship of the social media? Because you discover that citizen journalism or citizen journalists have been able to spread some of this fake news, some who don't verify information before passing them out. So I just want to get clarification on what the law is saying about misinformation, disinformation, and censorship generally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Toby.
Okay, so let me try to take those two questions real quick. So the first one, regulation versus media, I think they're two quite similar questions. For the first one, I deliberately have gone back to this slide. So there is the National Broadcasting Commission Act, which empowers NBC to issue licenses to media houses, but also to revoke those licenses or to fine the media houses for non-compliance with either the edicts it makes, but also its regulations. Now, I'll be honest. So first and foremost, the NBC Act, as it is written, has a few gaps in it that need to be redrafted. And if anybody wants to get a bit more details on that, I will find, we just did a policy brief on this. I can put the link to that policy brief in the chat box, so you can go look at it. And we also published this book, the Press Freedom Training Manual. It also talks about the various parts, of the NBC Act that is problematic. But the bigger issue is not even the NBC as much as it is the political capture of the NBC. Because as someone who also, works with the NBC from time to time and interacts with them from time to time, we know that a lot of the things that the NBC is made to do, they don't want to do. But because they don't have their independence, the guy who is running NBC, is nominated by the Minister for Information, and the Minister for Information has the power to get rid of him anytime he wants. So you've got people who are running an organization that is supposed to be independent, and this is a major gap in the Act, that is supposed to be independent and run by professionals who uphold the highest ethics of the profession, that is subject to the whims and caprices of an elected politician. It's because of issues like that that we say that the fight for press freedom is a fight of changing the law, of legal change. It's not something we just fight on the streets. It's something we fight in the courtrooms and we fight in the legislature, because those are the places where the laws can be changed. And that's the major problem with the NBC Act. So yes, you're right. We drive a coalition where every time a member of the press is attacked, we call that coalition the Coalition for Whistleblowers Protection, and we have a coalition of newsrooms where every time one of us is attacked, all of us move together to go address it. And that's one of the things that is happening with those fines that have been leveled against MultiChoice, BBC, and Daily Trust. In some cases, there are things that those organizations could have done differently, and that's often the case. But a lot of the fines that we see are very unjust and unfair. And to the question, to your precise question, where does regulation end, and what are the limits of regulation? And I think that limits, is really something that needs to come from the ethics of the profession and the principles that everybody who gets a license, by virtue of getting that license, signs up to. But then when you've written those wrongly, or you are administering those wrongly, or you are administering fines and levies that are not even in the Act, then there is a problem, which is what is happening right now. To the question of misinformation and disinformation and what is the role of government, I think it's a slippery slope. Once you start working on the supply side with policy, it's a slippery slope. Because when you write those policies, those same policies that you write, if you are a good person and you go write a policy or a law, like if you look at the NITDA code that came out a couple months ago, that became a big subject of debate. And we've written a policy brief on that as well. I'll put that link in the chat box also when the conversation is over. But that code, one of the things that code sought to do was to help with disinformation and to put some pressure on technology companies, the social media companies, the technology companies, to do something about misinformation and disinformation. But then when you write a law that says that, okay, anybody that posts something that they knowingly know to be false will either pay a fine or go to jail, then some politician can say, hey, this journalist wrote a story about me that is false. And therefore, because of this code, on the basis of this code and this act, we are putting him in jail. Now, you created it to tackle disinformation, but then you write something that someone doesn't like, even if they have the right evidence and they went through the right process to get to the truth, you know, someone can turn around and use that law to throw them in jail. So you've got to be very careful, you know, when you work on the supply side. And many times you've got to try and do a lot of the correction that you do on the demand side. And by the demand, but also even on the supply side, you know, try and do it on the market level. On the market level, have the organizations, have the organizations that are responsible for this come together and come up with a code of conduct. Have, you know, the journalism sector, the media itself, come together and agree on a code of conduct that we uphold ourselves to, and we sanction ourselves when we fail. So that supply side, there is something that can be done there, but we've got to be careful when we bring in governments to come and help us with the supply side. And on the demand side, we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that people, you know, have the right information, and that, you know, we're fact-checking stuff, and that we're also giving people the right education. But also, I think on the technology side as well, the tech companies also have a big role to play. The truth is, you know, if Facebook and Google and Amazon will prioritize disinformation today, they can stem it a lot. But because, you know, they are also run by human beings who mostly have their biases, and the algorithms that they also have for spotting things are not yet well attuned for these crimes, that also tends to be a bit of an impediment to them doing things that they ought to do. So it's not the summary of what I'm saying is that there is no simple answer to the questions that you guys have asked. You know, these are issues that we have to continue to interrogate, and where there are opportunities, you know, to conduct advocacy, to change laws that specifically, you know, help us reduce the incidence of press unfreedom, then we should all come together to do that. And I've identified a few of these laws. So there's been some advocacy on the Cyber Crimes Act, and that's in the process of being redrafted now. The same thing applies to the Anti-Terrorism Act. So we're making progress. It won't happen overnight. And there was a lot of engagement around the new NBC Act they wanted to come up with, and there's still an ongoing engagement on the current NBC Act. So it's an ongoing process that we're going through, that we need to go through. But just to highlight it to us that there's that tension that exists and remains to be fixed in the process of fixing our democracy. I'll stop there.
All right. All right. Well, feels like I should just keep sitting down here learning. But this has been a fantastic utilization of the past 1 hour, 30 minutes plus. So we'd like to thank Dr. Toby, and I can see that there are no more questions. But I would like to ask Dr. Toby, you said you would send links. So can you please help us with that? Or maybe
can I send those to Lisa after?
Lisa,
and then
yes,
she can
yes.
put it on the
She can
Telegram.
share it, yes. Yes.
She can share it on the Telegram. Okay.
Yes, that's fine. All right, thank you so much. Please let's appreciate our facilitator for his time, for his wealth of knowledge and experience that he has shared with us. It's always a good time having great people amongst us. Thank you so much, sir. He also shared his email on the group chat. So for as many of us that still have questions, would like to engage him in conversations, I'm sure we can do that. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Toby. It was such a pleasure having you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Lisa, do you have a comment or two before we wrap this up?
Okay, sorry, I'm actually in transit. Thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure having you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
And I'm sure the students would like to say thank you too. We can just tell our facilitator thank you, please.
Yes, they're doing that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a lovely evening. Good night.